Thank you all for joining us this morning. It's a beautiful and historic morning, maybe a little brisk, maybe a little cool, but nonetheless a beautiful morning at the Texas State Capitol as we break ground for the monument that will rise from this location to honor Texans who served in the armed forces during the Vietnam War. My name is Jerry Patterson. I'm the Commissioner of the Texas General Land Office and a Texas veteran of Vietnam serving in the United States Marine Corps. More than 500,000 Texas men and women served in the Vietnam War. The Texas Capitol Vietnam Veterans Monument will honor all of them. But today, as we break ground for that monument, we intend to pay special tribute to the 3,417 who made the ultimate sacrifice in Vietnam. Each of these Texas heroes is individually remembered on a hand-embossed dog tag bearing his name, his rank, his branch of service, his date of loss, and his home of record. These hero tags will be dedicated today for entombment in the Texas Capitol Vietnam Veterans Monument when it takes its place on this site sometime later this year. Dr. Charles Edwards, Brigadier General, Army National Guard retired, will lead us in prayer.
Let us pray. Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the beauty of this day and for your presence with us as we come together for this, the Texas Capitol Vietnam Veterans Monument groundbreaking ceremony. Our God, we realize that on this sacred ground will be placed a monument that will stand as a long overdue thank you to honor, to remember, and celebrate the great respect of our Vietnam veterans who served and called Texas home. Our God, we realize that this sacred ground will forever be a place where visitors can reflect on and honor over 500,000 men and women, our fellow Texans, who fought for and who served our nation, the United States of America, with honor and personal courage in Vietnam. Our God, we realize that on this sacred ground will be placed a monument that will forever serve as a reminder of the supreme sacrifices made by 3,417 Texans, those who gave their all for their country and their great state during the Vietnam War. We trust now that they rest in peace and your eternal dwelling place in paradise. Our God, we realize that this monument will stand on this sacred ground as a permanent reminder of the 105 Texans who answered the nation's call and remain, as of this day, missing in action in Vietnam. This monument will stand as a permanent reminder of the 17 Texans who earned the nation's highest commendation, the Congressional Medal of Honor. Our God, while the Vietnam War is history for some, we know that the healing continues for others. On this sacred ground, this monument will honor our Lone Star Vietnam veterans for their commitment, for their dedication, for their sacrifice during the Vietnam War. Our God, we ask now that you inspire us with renewed faith, greater devotion and determination as we face the uncertainty of world events and conditions. Continue to be with the members of our present-day military forces and use them to maintain peace and goodwill throughout the world. God bless our Vietnam veterans. God bless this land, our home we call Texas. In God we trust always. Amen.
Ben. Thank you, General. On 13 May 1967, Marine Corporal Milicio Ortiz of Crystal City, Texas, valiantly leapt from a covered position under heavy fire to provide machine gun cover to a helicopter that was evacuating wounded and dead Marines from an intense firefight. As he put his back to the aircraft and his face and his fire to the enemy, the aircraft was able to lift off safely. Corporal Ortiz was hit by enemy fire and killed in action. This young Texan's action saved the lives of the helicopter crew and the embarked Marines on board at the cost of his own. He was posthumously awarded the Silver Star for his heroism. His sister, Mrs. Clara Garcia, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This monument is a long overdue welcome home to our Texas Vietnam veterans. It has been a long and an often difficult road to get to this great day. But thanks to the Texas legislature, the committed veteran volunteers of the Texas Capitol Vietnam Veterans Monument Committee, and the generous support of the people of Texas, we are here at last. Many of us have probably strolled along the Capitol grounds, seeing the beautiful monuments that honor our forefathers who served our nation and our state in wartime, and possibly thought, wouldn't it be a good idea to have a monument here to those of us who served in Vietnam, our war? But then we probably put the notion aside and continued about our daily activities, maybe until the next stroll, and maybe the same thought occurred again. However, there was one man who did not put the notion aside. Instead, he turned that notion into an idea and then found others who shared that idea. He then committed himself to the hard work of turning that idea into a reality. For more than 7 years, Robert Floyd, 101st Airborne Division Vietnam veteran, has committed himself, in effect, a nearly full-time job as the chairman of the Texas State Capitol Vietnam Veterans Monument Committee. It's my pleasure to introduce my friend, Robert Floyd.
When we dedicate this monument next year, it will rise 14 feet high into the sky to honor all Texas Vietnam veterans who served in our armed forces. We would not be here today if it weren't for the work of the legislature, the Preservation Board, and over 600 donors, individuals, corporations, foundations that have helped us financially raise the money to support this project, which is currently being worked on at the Foundry in Bastrop. This Texas Capitol Vietnam Veterans Monument will also be a first. It will be the first monument on the Capitol grounds to represent the diversity of those who served and sacrificed in Vietnam. African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, Native Americans, and Caucasians. And when this monument is dedicated, it will also pay respect to our Vietnam American citizens who lost so much and sacrificed so much for their country. I look forward to that day when we can all stand here in the shadow of that monument. But today, as we break ground, our focus is on the 3,417 Texans who gave their lives in the service of their country, trying to go to the aid of a small country and paid the ultimate price. Names that we talked about yesterday, for those of you that were at the reading at the LBJ Presidential Library. A beautiful day, a solemn day, a day with a lot of tears and a lot of emotion, but a beautiful day nonetheless, as each name, each each 3,417 names were read. Robert Hale, Benito Montana, Larry Thurman. Those names cannot be said enough. And on a personal note, I was in junior high school back in Brady, Texas, and one of my high school heroes was a senior by the name of Burton McCard, who went to the United States Military Academy. I was a freshman in college at Southwest Texas, Lyndon Johnson's alma mater, when my mother called me and told me in 1965 that Lieutenant Burton McCard had been killed in Vietnam. At that point in time, I thought that Vietnam was just some far-off place that we didn't know much about. And although this war was controversial and political, this monument is not to be political. It is to honor those who served their country. It is to honor those individuals who left the farms and the homes, the big cities, the small towns, and served in Vietnam. So today we are here to consecrate this site. We will also be moving forward even after the monument is dedicated with a living monument through our website so that we can educate and tell the stories of Vietnam veterans and veterans of those people who came from Vietnam to settle in the United States. An educational project that can develop curriculum and provide information to schools, to universities, so that more people can come to understand the war about Vietnam. We were not welcomed home. One of the great, I think, things that our nation has learned in the last several years with our soldiers that have fought in Iraq and Afghanistan is to not to do to them what happened to us when we came back from Vietnam, but to welcome them home for their service. And I know that I join with every Vietnam veteran in saying to those guys and gals from Afghanistan and from Iraq, welcome home to you. So today we will break the ground on the sacred soil where this monument will stand, where we hope that forever the memories of these men who gave the last measure of devotion will be recognized and remembered through history. And I thank each and every one of you for being here and participating. And once again, welcome home.
On behalf of the City of Austin, I want to express my deepest condolences to the families and friends of the fallen. Vietnam veterans never asked for or expected anything in return for their service, other than respect and a heartfelt homecoming. Sadly, in too many cases, what they got upon their return was neither. So with this new memorial, we aim to articulate our profound compassion and gratitude to our Vietnam veterans and their families, and to pass on that compassion and gratitude to future generations. It also reminds us that we must also honor and assist our returning veterans from the wars of the last 11 years. So thank you to all involved with the Texas Capitol Vietnam Memorial Veterans. To all of our veterans and families, thank you. To our Vietnam veterans, thank you and welcome home. And may God bless the United States of America.
We are here today to honor and recognize all Texas Vietnam veterans, but particularly for those 3,417 that gave the ultimate, and that's a familiar sign, that gave the ultimate sacrifice to their country. House Concurrent Resolution 36 was, as mentioned before, unanimously passed in both houses. And it was so that all Texas veterans could have, and their families, and their grandchildren, and their great-grandchildren can come see the sacrifices made by all veterans, Vietnam veterans, that would be placed on this ground that we stand. I believe that the monument will be the grandest monument on the Capitol grounds, bar none, the most attended, and finally Vietnam veterans finally welcome home.
I finally feel like I am welcome back home. You know, I come from Mission High School, where I lost 3 classmates who died in Vietnam. A day doesn't go by that I don't remember my classmates who died for our country, died for our freedom, died for a way of life. Lionel Monteo, Merle Walter Langford, Jesus Martinez, all from Mission High School. Freddy Gonzalez was from a different high school, but Freddy Gonzalez was awarded the Medal of Honor, and he died in Hue. I will tell you that it is hard, all these years, having come back from a war and feel so unwelcome that many Vietnam veterans became street people, addicted to drugs, mental illness, and nowhere to go. The one thing I learned about Vietnam was that we, as a country, may have our disagreements politically, but when our freedom is threatened, when our way of life is threatened, we stand up together as a family, as a team. So I remember my squad. Anzio from New York, Italiano. We had 2 hillbillies out of West Virginia. We had a son of a preacher, blue-eyed, from Alabama. We had 2 California guys, the liberals. We had African Americans from Chicago. We had a redneck out of West Texas. We had a Bronco rider out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. We had some soldiers out of Chicago. But what was really amazing, we didn't know each other, yet we bonded very quickly, yet we're willing to die for each other, yet this is our country, and we're willing to fight. And it's amazing that strangers quickly find out that we are all Americans, that we're all in the same boat, and we'll fight for our religious freedom. We'll fight for our liberty. We'll fight for our way of life. And to this day, we'll continue to do so. For me, it's very emotional that we're finally recognizing the many American soldiers, but in particular our Texas veterans who died and fought for our liberty. Vietnam was not a popular war, but many times the public confused a popular war, unpopular war, with the courage and the valor of the American soldier. We as soldiers didn't get involved in the political arena. We were there to fight and follow orders from our commanders. It's amazing to me that having served in Vietnam made me such a better person, and I appreciate our life, I appreciate our families. And I remind people that the American soldiers is us, our brothers, our sisters, our neighbors, our parents, our sons and daughters. That's who we are. And I'm very proud to be here, finally getting a monument recognizing Texas veterans who sacrificed and paid the ultimate price for our country. God bless America. God bless Texas. Simplify.
At a time when our nation was painfully divided, over a really tough war in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. Some in our nation, I believe a minority, lost sight of the gratitude, the appreciation, and the reverence that the majority of Americans felt for all of our veterans serving in harm's way. So I don't think we can say it enough. Welcome home. And those two words, welcome home, is what this monument right here is all about. It hurts me to say that because I too served during the Vietnam War. As a officer, an intelligence officer in the United States Air Force at a bomber base, and later with the CIA overseas. This memorial is about righting the wrongs during a time when soldiers were told not to wear civilian clothes when they came back from Vietnam. When they were told not to wear their uniforms when they came back from Vietnam. They were told to wear their civilian clothes so they wouldn't be heckled or they wouldn't be spat at. Today, when you think about that, it just pulls at your heartstrings. How could that happen? But it did. Shameful. This memorial is about honoring the memory of 58,282 Americans who were killed in action, 3,417 Texans who were killed. My pledge son from college went to Vietnam, never came back. This memorial is about remembering that despite a controversy, American soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen fought and shed their blood and sacrificed as honorably during the Vietnam War as during any other war in the history of the United States. And this memorial is about the 500,000 men and women who served in the military during the Vietnam War. This memorial is about remembering all that you veterans have done, defending the freedoms and the liberties of all of us in America. In the Vietnam War, all gave some, and some gave all. And so to those 3,417,000 Texans and their families who will never forget, who this is very real, we give you our deepest sympathy and appreciation. It's that spirit that we honor today in hopes that this monument stands as a testament of our state's recognition of what happened. For all the eras of the past, for the times when your service was not given the gratitude and respect that you're owed. Thank you. Welcome home. And remember, the eyes of Texas, the very appreciative eyes of Texas, are upon you for the entirety of your life. God bless you, God bless Texas, and God bless the great United States of America.
Howdy. So what do y'all think? Is this a good day for a groundbreaking? Yeah, I think so too. I want to say thank you to everyone involved with the Texas Capitol Vietnam Veterans Monument. You dreamed it, you committed to it, and you've worked tireless hours to make this a reality. And now we have a monument where we can honor the 3,417 who were lost, and we can embrace our Vietnam veterans. To our Vietnam veterans here, I sure am glad to see you. This monument is for you. Thank you for your service and welcome home. I'm honored to be here today on behalf of the families of the 3,417 Texans lost in Vietnam, the 3,312 who were killed in action, and the 105 who are still missing in action. My name is Kearney Forrester, and I'm the daughter of Captain Ron Forrester, United States Marine Corps. Daddy was stationed in Nam Phong, Thailand, lovingly referred to as the Rose Garden, and he was a bombardier navigator on the esteemed A6A Intruder. Dad's commute to work involved flying over the Plain of Jars in Laos, to bomb strategic targets in North Vietnam. That kind of makes my commute here in Austin not seem quite so bad. On December 27th, 1972, Dad and his pilot went to take out a bridge on Highway 1 in North Vietnam. And they hit that bridge. I've been told Marines don't miss their targets. Dad's plane did not return to the garden that night. Anti-aircraft artillery shot the A-6 down, and we have conflicting reports about whether or not anyone got out of the plane. To date, my dad's crash site has not been prioritized for excavation, and he and his pilot, Captain Jim Chipman, are missing in action. Now, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my dad. Ron Forrester is the son of two of the most incredible people I have ever known. He is the brother of two. He is a twin. He is a husband. He is a nephew. He is a cousin. He is a best friend. He is an uncle. And he is a grandfather. He's a fighting Texas Aggie. He's a United States Marine. He is my father. He is missing. For families and friends, the fallen are more than a name on a wall. They are people we lived with, laughed with, loved. Their lives were cut short, and our lives were forever changed. MIA families and Gold Star families are in a club that no one wants to join. And while our individual stories may be different, we have many things in common. That proverbial knock at the door that all military families dread, our families endured. I was barely 2 years old when the Marines came knocking with the news that Daddy was MIA, and I don't remember that day. But I know how the story goes, and we were devastated. Now, some of my earliest memories are of sneaking into the back rooms of my grandparents' house to use the phone. Now, goodness only knows who I was reaching on the other end when I was rotary dialing with my tiny fingers, but I was looking for my dad. Because you see, the last time I talked to him, he was on the phone. And I thought if I kept looking for him there, maybe I would find him. And now, all these years later, I'm still searching for my father. Gold Star families and MIA families think about our lost loved one every day. But some days are harder than others. Holidays, where that empty chair at the holiday table can bring sudden flashes of intense grief. Birthdays, anniversaries, the day they were lost. This past December 27th marked 40 years since my dad was shot down, and it was harder than I expected to cross that milestone of time and still not have any answers. But we don't stop living. We're military families, and we do what they would want us to do. We go on. We've built our lives, our careers, our families. We have a deep scar from the Vietnam War, and that scar is on our hearts. Now, there's one group of people who have always been there for the families of the fallen, and that's the Vietnam veterans. You're always there to give us a hug or offer a shoulder to cry on. You Vietnam veterans came back from Southeast Asia as brothers, and you are the most loyal family I have ever met. You are loyal to each other, understanding each other in a way that no one else truly can. You are loyal to those you lost on the battlefield, and you ensure that they will not be forgotten. So I want to say thank you to the Vietnam veterans for embracing the families of the fallen as though we were your own. Thank you. This monument honors your service while being a memorial for the 3,417 Texans that gave their lives. For families like mine, this monument is a mighty symbol that our loved ones, their service, and their sacrifice will not be forgotten. Thank you again to all involved with this monument. Texas needs this. This monument will forever tell the story of what happened all those years ago in a land called Vietnam and the price that was paid by so many from this great state. God bless you all, and God bless Texas.
Joseph Galloway is a native of Euphoria, whose first job was working as a reporter for the Victoria Advocate newspaper. Not far into his career, Joe Galloway left Texas for Vietnam to cover the war for United Press International. In November of 1965, Joe Galloway heard that the Army's Heliborne Air Cavalry Unit might have gotten into some action in a place called Ia Drang Valley. So he hitched a ride on a Huey, headed for the battle, where he soon found himself not only as a reporter, but as a participant in the war he'd been sent to cover. Joe's experience in that first major battle of the Vietnam War led to his best-selling book, We Were Soldiers Once and Young, which was later made into a feature film. It also led the United States Army in bestowing him with the Bronze Star with Combat V for valor, the only such award given to a civilian by the United States Army during the Vietnam War. Joe Galloway is the recipient of many awards, including the Infantry's Doughboy Award and of many accolades, but the best accolade we can give him is the one he may be most proud of, Texan. Ladies and gentlemen, the man that General Norman Schwarzkopf described as a soldier's reporter and a soldier's friend, Texas native son, Joe Galloway.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out. Thank you, my Vietnam brothers and sisters. It's your day, one of your days. It's a big day. We come here to begin building this monument for 500,000 Texans who served, for 3,417 who didn't come home. It's about time. It's about time. It's 38 years. So this one at least will get built while some of us are still alive. That's nice. I came here to Austin 5-6 years ago, and they were having the first luncheon to talk about this at the LBJ. Ms. Robb, Lucy were there, the whole Johnson family. I only wish Mrs. Johnson had been there. This is just so good that this is being done, that the welcome home that was denied to so many honorable soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen, is going to get said. Finally. Finally. You know, when I went to Vietnam, I wandered all over the country. I marched with almost every unit that was on the ground. And always I looked for Texans, and I found them. And when I went into the Ia Drang Valley and participated in the worst battle of the whole war, a first battle, worst battle, 305 men killed in that fight. Hundreds wounded, you know, and I look and I see the Persian Gulf War with 180 killed, and we lost more than that in 4 days. I don't get me wrong, 180 beats the hell out of 305 or 58,700, but it was hard times. And when I looked around, there were more than 25 men from a 100-mile radius around Refugio, Texas, who were backing me up in that valley, in that battle. And out of them, 99% carried names like Cantu and Garcia and Hernandez and Pena and Ledesma. Yeah. So I knew who my brothers were. I knew. And there was one other guy down there named Tone Johnson. Got shot all to doll rags. Came home, laid up in an army hospital, and watched and saw the people he admired most, the doctors who were saving lives, not taking them. And he said, I want to be one of those. And with the help of the U.S. Army, a poor black kid from East Texas made it through college, made it through medical school, was an Army Reserve officer and doctor for 30 years. And, you know, probably 12 years ago, I got a phone call from somebody here in Austin and the Texas National Guard, and they said, we're thinking about appointing Colonel Tone Johnson to be the Texas 36th Division Surgeon General. You think he'd do a good job? I said, damn right he would. So there are a lot of stories out of Vietnam, 3 million of them. A lot of them are good. Most of them are good. You know, when people said things, nasty things, baby killers, stuff like that, that's not what I saw in Vietnam. That's not what I reported on. Those are not the men I marched with who risked their lives to save mine. That's not them. I know who they are. I know that since I came back from Vietnam, if I raise my hand and holler help, I got a battalion that will turn up to help. Oh, sit down, Times. I want to tell you something. A friend of mine who's now gone, Captain B.T. Collins, talked to a lot of veterans groups. B.T. did 2 tours in Vietnam. He came home from the second one missing his right leg and his right arm. There wasn't much left of B.T., but he spent 1.5 years in the hospital, and he came through it okay. Got out, went to college, became a lawyer, went into politics in California. He would stand up in front of a veterans group, and here's what he would tell them. No whining and no crying. We are the fortunate ones. We survived when so many better men all around us gave their precious lives so that we might live. We owe them a sacred obligation to live every day to its fullest potential, working to make this world a better place for our having lived and their having died. And I got to tell you, Vietnam veterans are getting near the end of their string, but we ain't done. We got work yet to do. A lot of work. As long as there is one homeless veteran sleeping under a bridge, or one child who goes to bed hungry at night, we are not exceptional. We have not gotten there. We have work to do, and I don't know anybody who can take on a challenge better than Vietnam veterans. Thank you. God bless you. God bless Texas. Thank you for this memorial. Thank you for the honor you pay to our fallen brothers.
It is such an honor to be here today with our veterans and the families. And a great friend once told me that there is great grief when there has been great love. And there's one group of people here who never gave up, whose constant faith, whose unwavering prayers, and whose sweet embrace into the loving arms of those who did return. And that's the mamas and the wives and the sisters and the young daughters. And so before I read and ask those who are our veterans who are going to help us, ladies, mamas, sisters, wives, and young daughters, would you please stand, because you never gave up and you always held your head up high when they returned home to you. As we turn the soil to break ground for our Texas Capitol Vietnam Veterans Monument, our Texas elected leaders who are Vietnam veterans will join the Vietnam veteran representatives of the armed forces to perform this sacred duty today in symbolic tribute to all who served. And it is my honor to introduce them. I would ask that they would stand as I introduce them. Senator Juan Chuy Hinojosa served in the U.S. Marine Corps Infantry in Vietnam and the co-sponsor of our legislation authorizing the construction of the Texas Capitol Vietnam Veteran Monument. Texas Land Commissioner Jerry Patterson, who served as a naval flight officer and volunteered for duty in Vietnam in 1972. Commissioner Patterson served in Marine fighter squadrons until his retirement from the Marine Corps Reserve as a lieutenant colonel. Representative Wayne Smith served in the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War and, of course, with our Senator Hinojosa, was responsible for this legislation. Representative Bill Zedler entered the United States Army in 1967 and served in Vietnam as a hospital personnel officer. Mr. Robert Floyd is the chairman of the Texas Capitol Vietnam Veteran Monument Committee and a Vietnam veteran who served with the 101st Airborne Division. Mr. Joe Galloway of Refugio worked in Vietnam as a combat correspondent reporting on the war and is the only civilian to receive a Bronze Star with a V for Valor by the United States Army for service in Vietnam. Representing the women who served in Vietnam is Ms. Patricia Rowan, a native of Houston, now residing in Austin, who served 2 tours in Vietnam with the American Red Cross Supplemental Recreation Overseas Program, the only woman in the United States to do 2 tours in this close military support role. Representing the United States Army is Dr. Tone Johnson, originally from Marshall and now from Corpus Christi. As a young private, Dr. Johnson served in the 1st Cavalry, 7th Cavalry Regiment and was seriously wounded in action during one of the first major battles of Vietnam War, Battle of La Drake. Representing the United States Marine Corps is Mr. Eloy Rodriguez of Beeville. Mr. Rodriguez served as a radio man with the U.S. Marines in 1968, where he spent most of the year in Khe Sanh during the siege. Representing the United States Navy is Mr. Stan Doc Sellers of Bandera. Mr. Sellers served in Vietnam as a Navy corpsman assigned to the 3rd Marine Division Reconnaissance Patrol in 1968 until he was seriously wounded in action. Representing the United States Air Force is Colonel Jim Lamar, U.S. Air Force retired, who lives in Austin. Colonel Lamar flew for the Air Force in the Korean and Vietnam Wars until on May 6, 1966, during his 84th combat mission, he was shot down over North Vietnam and taken prisoner. Colonel Lamar endured torture and captivity as a prisoner of war in the Hanoi Hilton for nearly 7 years. And last, but by no means least, representing the 3,417 Texas families whose loved ones gave their lives in service to our nation during the Vietnam War, is Gold Star mother, Mrs. Oletta Smith. Mrs. Smith's son, Sergeant James Warren Smith of Dumas, Texas, was killed in action on August 23, 1968, while serving as a Green Beret medic in the U.S. Army's 5th Special Forces Group. Sergeant Smith died saving the life of a fellow soldier. And on behalf of all Texans who fought and otherwise served in Vietnam, and with support of the grateful people of Texas, let us now break ground for the Texas Capitol Vietnam Veterans Monument.
We finalize our salute to the Texas Vietnam heroes with a special military ceremony. In the heat of battle, there is neither time to mourn the loss of or the opportunity to have a fitting farewell to your lost comrades. So following the return to the relative safety of the fire base, a formal remembrance ceremony was held by each unit to honor the brave men lost in combat. This came to be known by many as a fire base ceremony. So today, as our Texas heroes are dedicated for eternal remembrance on these grounds at the center of our state's government, let us all stand together as Texans and Texas Vietnam veterans to welcome our fallen brothers home.